A karate black belt mocks an old man at a community center, convinced this washed-up movie star is just another Hollywood fake. The arrogant instructor humiliates the quiet stranger in front of dozens of families, demanding he prove his ancient techniques work in real combat. But this silver-haired man sitting calmly in the back row isn't just another aging action star. This is Steven Seagal himself, six-time world karate champion and aikido master. The cocky young fighter has no idea he just challenged a legend who's been breaking bones since before he was born. While the black belt flexes for the cameras, the aikido master rises with the fluid grace of a predator who's spent decades perfecting the art of controlled violence. The families gasp as they recognize the icon, but the instructor is too drunk on his own arrogance to notice the shift in the room. Security cameras are rolling as the young fool prepares to attack a man who once made grown killers beg for mercy. What happens when 30 years of tournament trophies meets 50 years of lethal mastery? Will the black belt survive learning why some movie stars earned their reputation the hard way? What happened next would shatter the instructor's ego for the rest of his pathetic career. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Riverside Community Center, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor where 40 folding chairs formed a neat semicircle. Families settled in with the comfortable chatter of a Saturday gathering, grandparents adjusting their sweaters, parents corralling restless children, teenagers reluctantly pulled away from their phones. Marcus Webb adjusted his pristine black belt one final time and stepped onto the blue practice mat with the confidence of a man who owned every room he entered. At 28, he possessed the lean, muscular frame of a dedicated martial artist, his movements sharp and precise as he addressed his audience. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Elite Combat Academy's community demonstration, Marcus announced, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention. I'm Marcus Webb, third-degree black belt and regional champion. Today, you'll see what modern martial arts training can accomplish. His assistant, Billy Garrett, hurried to arrange wooden boards and training equipment while Marcus began his routine. Flashy kicks snapped through the air with theatrical precision. Boards splintered on cue. The crowd offered polite applause as Marcus explained his philosophy between demonstrations. Modern martial arts for modern threats, he declared, breaking another board with a spinning heel kick. Real self-defense requires real training, not the outdated techniques you see in old movies. In the back row, a man in his early 70s watched with quiet intensity. Dressed simply in a gray sweater and dark jeans, he sat with perfect posture, hands relaxed on his knees. This was Steven Seagal, though none would recognize him in such humble surroundings. His intelligent dark eyes followed every movement, occasionally nodding at proper technique, but frowning when Marcus prioritized flash over substance. Helen Rodriguez, a silver-haired grandmother in the third row, occasionally glanced back at the mysterious observer. Something about his stillness commanded attention. The way he held himself suggested depths beneath the surface. Marcus noticed the older man's focused attention and felt a familiar surge of superiority. Another aging wannabe trying to relive his glory days, no doubt. The type who thought watching kung fu movies made them martial artists. Any questions about what you've seen today? Marcus asked as his demonstration concluded that a 7-year-old boy raised his hand eagerly. Have you ever met any real martial arts movie stars? Marcus's expression shifted to practiced disdain. Real martial arts has nothing to do with Hollywood. Nonsense, son. Those actors give our art a bad name with their fake choreography and special effects. Steven's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as Marcus continued his dismissive rant about movie star fighters who corrupted true martial arts. The lecture was building towards something, and Steven sensed exactly where it was heading. Marcus stepped down from the mat with exaggerated showmanship, his eyes drifting deliberately towards Steven. The older man's careful attention had been noted, and Marcus saw an opportunity to make his point about generational superiority. Sir, Marcus called out with condescending politeness, approaching Steven's chair. I noticed you watching very carefully throughout the demonstration. Are you a martial artist yourself? Steven looked up calmly, his voice measured and quiet. I have some experience. Wonderful. Marcus's tone carried the false enthusiasm of a predator who'd found easy prey. Would you like to show the folks what the older generation learned back in the day? I'm sure everyone would love to see some of those traditional techniques. The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge wrapped in courtesy. Stephen attempted to deflect graciously. I appreciate the invitation, but I'm just here to watch and learn. Detective Rita Kowalski chose that moment to arrive, checking on the community center as part of her regular patrol. She positioned herself near the entrance, immediately sensing the tension radiating from the interaction. Marcus pressed his advantage, his voice growing louder for the audience's benefit. Come now, don't be modest. I bet you've got some interesting moves from the old school. Maybe some of those ancient techniques they used before we understood real combat science. Several audience members shifted uncomfortably as Marcus's tone became increasingly mocking. Helen Rodriguez gripped her purse strap, recognizing the cruel sport being played out before them. The thing is, Marcus continued, warming to his theme. People today think martial arts is like what they see in movies. All that Hollywood choreography and wire work. Real fighting is nothing like those old action flicks with guys pretending to be invincible. Stephen remained seated, but Detective Kowalski noticed his breathing had changed, deeper, more controlled. The kind of preparation she'd seen before confrontations. I bet you think Steven Seagal is a real fighter. Marcus laughed, playing to the crowd. That's the problem with movies. They make people believe in fairy tales instead of genuine martial arts training. The room fell into sudden, absolute silence. Even the children stopped fidgeting. Stephen slowly rose from his chair, his full height and presence immediately commanding the space. When he spoke, his voice carried quiet authority that seemed to resonate from the walls themselves. Actually, he said with perfect calm, I am Steven Seagal. The words landed like a physical blow. Helen Rodriguez audibly gasped, her purse tumbling to the floor. Detective Kowalski's eyes widened in recognition of the legend standing 20 feet away. Marcus's confident smile faltered for just a moment before returning with forced bravado. This had to be some kind of joke. Stunned silence gripped the community center as the implications of Stephen's quiet revelation sank in. Helen Rodriguez fumbled for her dropped purse, her hands trembling with excitement. Several audience members immediately pulled out their phones, fingers flying over screens to confirm what their eyes were telling them. Marcus laughed dismissively, though the sound carried less confidence than before. Right, and I'm Bruce Lee. Anyone can claim to be a movie star, old man. That's him. Frank Patterson called out from the front row. The 72-year-old Vietnam veteran struggled to his feet, his weathered face breaking into a respectful smile. Saw you in Hard to Kill about 20 times, son. Honored to meet you. The phone searches were confirming what Frank already knew. Excited whispers rippled through the crowd as people began recognizing the iconic face beneath the silver hair and simple clothes. This is ridiculous, Marcus snapped, but uncertainty crept into his voice. The room's energy had shifted completely, attention flowing away from him toward the quiet man he'd been mocking. Detective Kowalski moved closer, positioning herself where she could intervene if necessary. Her martial arts background helped her recognize something Marcus was missing: the way Stephen held himself, the perfect economy of movement as he removed his sweater. This wasn't the posture of a retired actor playing pretend. That a teenage girl approached Stephen shyly, holding out her phone. Would you mind taking a picture with me? Of course, Stephen replied with genuine warmth, his demeanor transforming into gracious professionalism. He smiled naturally for the photo while Marcus seized of being upstaged. The girl's friends quickly joined the impromptu photo session, chattering excitedly about movies they'd watched with their parents. Stephen accommodated each request with patient kindness, but Detective Kowalski noticed his awareness never wavered. He tracked every person's movement while maintaining perfect courtesy. This is all very touching, Marcus interrupted loudly. But anyone can pose for pictures. If you're really Steven Seagal, then you won't mind proving it with a friendly demonstration. Unless Hollywood's made you too soft for real martial arts. The challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown at Stephen's feet. Several audience members looked uncomfortable with Marcus's aggressive tone, but the instructor had painted himself into a corner. His reputation demanded he follow through. Stephen looked around the room. taking in the expectant faces of families who'd come for entertainment and found themselves witnessing something far more significant. Frank Patterson nodded encouragingly. Helen Rodriguez watched with maternal concern mixed with anticipation. "If that's what it takes to end this," Steven said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent avoiding exactly this kind of confrontation. Marcus stripped off his jacket, revealing his competition-trained physique. "Let's see what those movie moves look like against real technique." The crowd reshuffled into a rough circle around the practice mat, phones appearing as spectators prepared to document what promised to be either a legendary demonstration or an embarrassing mismatch. Marcus bounced lightly on his feet, shadowboxing to display his conditioning and speed. Steven simply stood at the mat's edge, adjusting his jeans and centering himself through controlled breathing. The contrast was stark, youth and aggression facing age and stillness. "Whenever you're ready, Grandpa," Marcus taunted, raising his hands in a classic fighting stance. Steven stepped onto the mat with fluid grace, his movements betraying none of the stiffness one might expect from a man in his 70s. His stance was relaxed but perfectly balanced, hands loose at his sides. Marcus attacked immediately, launching a rapid combination of punches designed to overwhelm an older opponent. Through speed and aggression, his technique was solid, his form textbook perfect. Steven didn't counterattack. Instead, he demonstrated the pure essence of aikido, the art of redirecting force rather than opposing it. As Marcus's first punch came forward, Steven stepped slightly to the side, his hand barely touching Marcus's wrist to guide the strike past its target. The movement was so subtle that many spectators missed it entirely. Marcus's second attack met the same fate. Steven blended with the motion, redirecting the energy with minimal effort while maintaining perfect balance. Marcus stumbled slightly, confused by the complete absence of resistance. The third exchange revealed Steven's mastery. As Marcus committed to a powerful cross punch, Steven stepped into the movement, his left hand controlling Marcus's elbow while his right guided the extended arm. In one fluid motion, he used Marcus's own momentum to execute a perfect forward throw. Marcus found himself airborne for a brief, disorienting moment before landing face down on the mat, with Steven's knee pressed gently but firmly against his back. The entire sequence had taken less than 10 seconds. Silence stretched for a heartbeat before erupting into amazed applause. Frank Patterson's voice boomed above the rest. "Outstanding. That's how it's done." Several teenagers immediately began uploading videos to social media while parents clapped appreciatively. Helen Rodriguez beamed with pride as if watching her own grandson succeed. Steven helped Marcus to his feet with courteous professionalism, offering his hand with genuine respect for his opponent's effort. Marcus jerked away from the assistants, his face flushed with humiliation and rage. The careful image he'd built over years had been dismantled in seconds by a man he'd dismissed as a washed-up actor. "This isn't over, old man," Marcus snarled, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "Nobody makes a fool out of Marcus Webb." Steven's response carried an edge beneath its calm delivery. "Son, you did that all by yourself." As Marcus stormed toward the exit with Billy hurrying behind him, the crowd surrounded Steven with questions and requests for more photos. But Detective Kowalski remained focused on Marcus's parting threat, her instincts warning that this confrontation was far from finished. 2 hours later, Marcus sat hunched over his laptop in the Elite Combat Academy office, watching his humiliation spread across the internet like wildfire. The video had already accumulated thousands of views on multiple platforms, each share adding another layer to his public disgrace. His phone buzzed incessantly, students canceling classes, parents demanding explanations, fellow martial artists offering mock sympathy mixed with barely concealed glee. The comments sections were brutal, ranging from mocking laughter to genuine appreciation for Steven's effortless technique. "Dude, you need to see this," his business partner Craig Donnelly said, bursting through the office door with his own phone. "It's on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, everywhere. Arrogant instructor gets schooled by Steven Seagal is trending." Marcus slammed the laptop shut. "I don't want to hear it." Meanwhile, across town at a quiet coffee shop, Steven sat with Helen Rodriguez and Detective Kowalski, trying to enjoy a peaceful conversation despite constant interruptions from starstruck fans. He signed napkins and posed for selfies with patient grace while the two women watched admiringly. "I have to admit," Detective Kowalski said during a brief lull, "that was the most elegant takedown I've ever witnessed. But I'm concerned about that young man's reaction." Steven nodded thoughtfully. "Pride makes people dangerous when it's wounded." Kowalski leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Actually, I've been investigating some troubling patterns around local martial arts schools. 3 college students have disappeared after enrolling in advanced training programs advertised on social media. All were recruited with promises of training with international masters." "Human trafficking?" Helen asked, horrified. "The FBI thinks so. These kids respond to online ads, attend one session, then vanish. Their families get told they've gone to exclusive training camps, but we can never locate these facilities." Steven's expression hardened. His law enforcement background immediately recognized the methodology: vulnerable targets, legitimate-seeming recruitment, and isolation from support networks. Back at the academy, Marcus's phone rang with an unknown number. The voice carried a slight accent, possibly Russian. "Mr. Webb, I understand you had some difficulties today. Perhaps we can help each other. My name is Viktor Kozlov, and I have a proposition that might restore your reputation." Marcus, desperate and humiliated, didn't hesitate. "I'm listening." "Excellent. Meet me at Palazzo's restaurant downtown in 1 hour. Come alone." The upscale downtown restaurant buzzed with evening conversation as Marcus arrived to find Viktor Kozlov waiting at a corner table. The Russian was impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his cold blue eyes studying Marcus with predatory assessment. 2 silent associates positioned themselves strategically around the dining area. "Mr. Webb," Victor rose with practiced charm, extending a manicured hand. "Thank you for coming. I trust you're ready to discuss business." Marcus slid into the opposite chair, still smarting from his public humiliation. "What kind of business?" Victor smiled without warmth. "The kind that turns setbacks into opportunities. I've been monitoring your academy and others like it across the region. You have potential, but you lack proper guidance." The conversation proceeded in carefully coded language. Victor spoke of expanding training opportunities and international connections, while Marcus grew increasingly intrigued by promises of restored prestige and financial success. "What exactly are you proposing?" Marcus asked. "Partnership. My organization provides resources, connections, and opportunities your current operation cannot access. In return, you help us identify promising students for advanced programs." Meanwhile, Steven sat in his modest hotel room, unable to shake Detective Kowalski's concerns about the missing students. His investigative instincts kicked in as he researched the disappearances online, cross-referencing social media profiles and news reports. The patterns were disturbing. All 3 missing students, Tommy Chun, Jennifer Walsh, and David Martinez, had responded to similar online advertisements promising elite martial arts training. Their social media showed excitement about exclusive opportunities before going silent. Steven's methodical approach revealed connections the official investigation had missed. The recruitment ads traced back to a tournament promotion company called Elite Champions Network that had no verifiable business address. The company's website featured stock photos and testimonials that appeared fabricated. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop looking into things that don't concern you." Steven studied the message for a long moment, then returned to his research with renewed determination. Someone was watching his investigation, which meant he was getting close to something important. Back at the restaurant, Victor slid a business card across the white tablecloth. "Think about my offer, Mr. Webb. We could use someone with your ambition. And perhaps we can arrange for you to have another encounter with Mr. Seagal under more controlled circumstances." Marcus pocketed the card, his humiliation transforming into something darker. "What kind of encounter?" "The kind where you win." Dawn was breaking over Denver when Steven met Detective Kowalski at Mel's 24-hour diner, a fluorescent-lit refuge, where coffee burned strong and conversations stayed private. Kowalski looked haggard from working through the night, files spread across their corner booth. "I found something," she said without preamble, sliding a photograph across the chipped formica table. Tommy Chun was last seen entering this storage facility on the city's outskirts. Security cameras caught him going in, but he never came out. Steven studied the image of a sprawling self-storage complex surrounded by chain-link fencing. Same facility connected to the other disappearances? Jennifer Walsh rented a unit there 2 days before vanishing. David Martinez was seen in the parking lot the night he disappeared. Kowalski's voice carried the frustration of a cop hitting bureaucratic walls. I can't get a warrant without more evidence. And the owners claim they have no record of the kids. Then we'll have to look. Unofficially, Steven said quietly. Steven, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Against Kowalski's protests, Steven drove to the storage facility alone. His reconnaissance training kicked in as he surveyed the complex, identifying security weaknesses and guard patterns. The place felt wrong. Too much security for simple storage units, too many areas blocked from public view. Using stealth techniques honed through decades of training, Steven infiltrated the facility's perimeter. What he discovered confirmed his worst suspicions. Converted storage units holding young people prisoner, armed guards with distinctive tattoos marking them as organized crime operatives, and evidence of systematic human trafficking, the IN Unit 247. He found Tommy Chun and 2 other captives, Jennifer Walsh and David Martinez, all alive but clearly traumatized. Their guards carried automatic weapons and communicated in what sounded like Russian. Steven's rescue operation was methodical and efficient. 3 guards were silently neutralized using aikido techniques that left them unconscious but alive. The captives were escorted to safety through the same route Steven had used to enter. As they reached his vehicle, Steven's phone rang. Victor's accented voice carried cold menace. Mr. Seagal, you're becoming a problem. Perhaps we should discuss this face-to-face. I'd be happy to meet, Steven replied calmly, helping Tommy Chun into the passenger seat. Excellent. I'm hosting a tournament next weekend. Very exclusive. I'll send details. After delivering the rescued students to Detective Kowalski's protective custody, Steven knew the game had changed. Victor's organization was larger and more dangerous than anyone had suspected, and his intervention had made him a target. Marcus arrived at the storage facility to find chaos, overturned vehicles, unconscious guards, and evidence of Steven's devastating efficiency. Victor's associates informed him that his chance for revenge had just become much more personal and infinitely more dangerous. Viktor Kozlov stood in the center of an abandoned warehouse complex, supervising the construction of what appeared to be a legitimate martial arts tournament venue. Workers installed professional lighting, temporary seating, and medical facilities, while Victor's lieutenants coordinated security arrangements with military precision. The Underground Champions Tournament will draw the best fighters from across the region, Victor explained to Marcus, who had arrived looking eager for revenge. Substantial prize money, media coverage, and most importantly, Steven Seagal's curiosity. Marcus watched the preparations with growing excitement. You think he'll come? He won't be able to resist investigating. His law enforcement background makes him predictable. He'll see the tournament as an opportunity to gather intelligence on our operation. Victor's smile was coldly calculating. What he won't realize until too late is that the tournament is designed specifically to eliminate him. Meanwhile, Steven met with Detective Kowalski and FBI agent Patricia Manning at a safe house across town. Manning, a seasoned undercover specialist, had been investigating Victor's trafficking network for months without making significant progress. The tournament is a known front for criminal recruitment, Manning explained, spreading photographs. Across the conference table, fighters who show potential but lack strong family connections get invited to exclusive training camps and subsequently disappear into international trafficking networks. Steven studied the tournament promotional materials Manning had obtained. The event promised substantial prize money and featured legitimate fighters alongside Victor's operatives. It's obviously a trap. Obviously, Manning agreed. But it's also our best opportunity to gather actionable intelligence on Victor's broader operation. We need someone inside who can identify the trafficking victims and document the criminal activities. Kowalski looked concerned. Steven, you can't seriously be considering this. I'm not just considering it, Steven replied quietly. I'm accepting their invitation. Manning nodded approvingly. You'll have backup, but it needs to appear completely authentic. Victor's organization is sophisticated. They'll be watching for any signs of law enforcement coordination. Steven spent the evening studying fighter profiles and tournament brackets, identifying which participants were legitimate athletes and which were likely victors' plants. His plan was straightforward: enter the tournament, gather evidence, and rescue any trafficking victims. As he prepared for bed in his hotel room, Steven's phone chimed with an official tournament invitation email. The message was professional and enticing, promising substantial prize money for the winner. At 3 in the morning, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. "We took the old lady. Come to the tournament alone, or Helen Rodriguez suffers. You have 24 hours. Steven's calm facade cracked for the first time since this nightmare began. Helen, the kindly grandmother who had recognized him, who had become a symbol of the community he was protecting, was now Victor's hostage. That he stared at the message, feeling the cold rage that had once made him legendary. Now it was personal. The abandoned warehouse complex sprawled across several acres of industrial wasteland, its towering structures converted into an impressive tournament venue. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through skylights as Steven arrived to find legitimate fighters checking in alongside Victor's operatives, the distinction clear only to trained eyes. Professional rings occupied the main floor, surrounded by bleacher seating and vendor areas that gave the event an authentic atmosphere. The substantial prize purse had attracted genuine martial artists from across the region, providing perfect cover for Victor's criminal enterprise. Steven registered under his real name, causing immediate excitement among participants and staff. Word spread quickly through the facility. The legendary Steven Seagal was competing. Several fighters approached with respectful requests for photos and autographs, which Steven accommodated while systematically mapping the facility's layout. "Mr. Seagal?" A deep voice interrupted his reconnaissance. Steven turned to meet Jimmy Morrison, a heavyweight boxer from Detroit whose calloused hands and scarred knuckles spoke of countless battles. "Honored to meet you, sir. Been watching your movies since I was a kid." "The honor's mine," Steven replied, immediately recognizing genuine character in the man's direct gaze. "What brings you here?" "Prize money," Jimmy admitted without shame. "My gym's struggling, and this tournament could keep it open another year. Feed a lot of kids who need somewhere safe to train." Steven nodded approvingly. Here was someone fighting for the right reasons, protecting his community through boxing programs that kept teenagers off dangerous streets. He also met Carlos Mendoza, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt whose technical expertise was matched by quiet professionalism, and Danny Park, a Korean taekwondo champion whose kicks could shatter concrete. All were legitimate fighters drawn by substantial prize money, unaware of the tournament's darker purpose. Boris Petrov, Victor's tournament director, announced that fighters must surrender communication devices for security purposes during competition. Steven reluctantly complied, but not before making eye contact with Dr. Patricia Manning, who was maintaining her cover as tournament physician. Her subtle nod confirmed she was gathering intelligence while treating minor injuries and monitoring fighter health. The medical facilities were equipped beyond normal tournament requirements, including surgical equipment that suggested more serious procedures than sports medicine typically required. As evening approached, Steven realized the tournament's true scope. This wasn't just a trap for him. It was a recruitment and elimination operation targeting the region's most skilled martial artists. Tournament preliminaries began at dawn, with 3 simultaneous rings hosting elimination matches. Steven's first opponent was Miguel Santos, a 280-pound Brazilian jiu-jitsu specialist whose reputation for ground-and-pound techniques made him a formidable challenge in the no-holds-barred format. The crowd of legitimate fighters gathered ringside. As Steven stepped onto the canvas, Santos immediately attempted to close distance, using his size advantage to force a grappling exchange where his weight and youth would dominate. Steven adapted his aikido principles to the aggressive format, redirecting Santos's takedown attempts while maintaining distance and balance. When Santos lunged forward with a double-leg takedown, Steven stepped aside and used the larger man's momentum to guide him past the target, leaving Santos grasping air. The Brazilian's second attempt succeeded in bringing the fight to the ground. But Steven's decades of cross-training showed immediately. He used Aikido's circular movements to prevent Santos from establishing dominant positions, creating space and controlling distance even from his back. Santos attempted to rain down punches, from mount position, but Steven's defensive movement kept him safe while looking for opportunities to reverse position. When Santos overcommit to a heavy right hand, Steven captured the extended arm and used leverage to sweep his opponent over. The standing submission came when Santos desperately shot for another takedown. Steven sprawled to defend, controlling Santos's head with his left hand while wrapping his right arm around the exposed neck. The blood choke was applied with technical precision, firm enough to cut off circulation but controlled enough to avoid permanent damage. Santos tapped frantically, and Steven immediately released pressure, helping his defeated opponent to his feet with genuine respect. The display of sportsmanship earned appreciative nods from legitimate fighters, while Victor's operatives took notes on Steven's techniques. Jimmy Morrison won his preliminary match via knockout, his boxing expertise overwhelming a much younger kickboxer. Carlos Mendoza advanced through superior ground technique, while Danny Park's kicks proved too fast and powerful for his opponent to handle. Between rounds, Steven observed that several matches featured unusual brutality. Fighters who seemed uncomfortable with the tournament's atmosphere were being matched against particularly vicious opponents, while those who embraced the violence advanced easily. Dr. Manning's medical examinations revealed another disturbing pattern. Some fighters showed signs of chemical enhancement or psychological conditioning, suggesting they weren't entirely willing participants in Victor's operation. As preliminary rounds concluded, Boris announced that all remaining fighters would be housed on-site overnight for security and medical monitoring. Steven realized the facade of legitimacy was crumbling, and the real tournament was about to begin. Evening descended over the warehouse complex as 16 remaining fighters were escorted to converted office spaces that served as overnight quarters. Steven found himself rooming with Jimmy Morrison, whose street-smart background from Detroit had taught him to recognize dangerous situations. "Something's not right about this place," Jimmy said quietly, checking that their door was properly closed. "Security's too tight, and some of these fighters look scared instead of excited." Steven nodded, having reached the same conclusion. "What have you noticed?" Danny Park mentioned seeing armed guards in areas we're not supposed to access. Carlos found cell phone jamming equipment when he got lost looking for the bathroom. Jimmy's voice carried the careful tone of someone accustomed to dangerous neighborhoods. "This feels like the setup for something bad." Within an hour, 3 other legitimate fighters had quietly approached their quarters with similar concerns. Danny Park reported locked doors in sections of the facility where captives might be held. Carlos Mendoza had overheard staff discussing special cargo in Building C that needed careful handling. Steven carefully assessed which fighters could be trusted. Jimmy's protective instincts toward young people made him a natural ally. Danny's traditional Korean martial arts background emphasized honor and justice. Carlos's Brazilian jiu-jitsu training included community service work with at-risk youth. "If this is what I think it is," Steven said carefully, "we need to work together to protect innocent people. But it's going to be dangerous." The 4 men spent the next hour sharing information and developing contingency plans. Jimmy would monitor guard movements and communication patterns. Danny would map the facility's layout and identify potential escape routes. Carlos would maintain contact with Dr. Manning during medical examinations to gather intelligence. Steven's reconnaissance mission to Building C required navigating the complex's security systems without triggering alarms. His law enforcement background provided the skills needed for covert movement, while his martial arts training ensured he could handle unexpected encounters silently. The building's perimeter was patrolled by armed guards carrying military-grade equipment. Steven used shadows and architectural features to avoid detection while working his way toward the structure where captives were reportedly held. As he approached Building C's main entrance, voices carried through the night air. 2 guards were escorting a familiar figure between buildings. Helen Rodriguez, looking tired but defiant as her captors guided her toward what appeared to be a medical facility. Steven's heart rate spiked as he realized Victor was using Helen's captivity to ensure his compliance with whatever horrors tomorrow's tournament would bring. But seeing her alive and mobile gave him hope that rescue remained possible. The sight of Helen in custody transformed Steven's mission from intelligence gathering to active rescue preparation. Steven maintained concealment near Building C as he observed security procedures and facility layout. Through windows, he counted at least 20 captives in converted office spaces, including Helen, Tommy Chun, and several other missing persons from Detective Kowalski's cases. While conducting surveillance, he overheard a crucial conversation between Victor and Marcus in the building's main corridor. Their voices carried clearly through an open window as they discussed the tournament's true purpose. The legitimate fighters serve multiple functions, Victor explained coldly. The skilled ones get recruited for international underground circuits after proper conditioning. The resistant ones get eliminated during tomorrow's matches. Either way, we profit. Marcus absorbed this information eagerly. What about Seagal? He's been studying my techniques through old footage and police training videos. I've developed specific countermeasures and trained you in anti-aikido methods. Tomorrow, you'll have your revenge while eliminating our biggest threat. Steven realized. The tournament matches were designed as execution chambers disguised as sporting events. Victor had been preparing for this confrontation since their first phone call, studying Steven's fighting style and developing tactics to neutralize his strengths. The conversation revealed more disturbing details. Dr. Manning's medical examinations were identifying fighters suitable for different criminal enterprises, some for underground fighting, others for forced labor operations. The medical equipment Steven had noticed was being used to implant tracking devices and administer drugs for psychological conditioning. Most shocking was the revelation about Detective Kowalski. Victor's casual mention of our police contact confirmed Steven's growing suspicions about law enforcement corruption. Kowalski had been feeding Victor information about the investigation, protecting the criminal operation while maintaining her cover as a concerned officer. Tomorrow's fights begin at dawn, Victor continued. By evening, we'll have eliminated all threats and harvested our best prospects. The legitimate law enforcement response will find only an unfortunate tournament accident. Steven retreated carefully to report his findings, but discovered that fighter quarters were now under armed guard. His allies were trapped in their rooms, while Victor's forces prepared for tomorrow's systematic elimination of witnesses. Dr. Manning intercepted him in a medical supply room, revealing her true identity as FBI agent Patricia Manning. Her months of undercover work had provided crucial intelligence about Victor's international network, but tomorrow's tournament represented the culmination of his criminal enterprise. He's planning to eliminate all the legitimate fighters while harvesting others for trafficking, Manning whispered urgently. The medical procedures I've been forced to perform include implanting tracking devices and administering psychological conditioning drugs. Together, they realized that tomorrow's tournament wasn't just about eliminating Steven. It was designed to systematically process an entire group of skilled martial artists for criminal purposes. The scope of Victor's operation extended far beyond simple human trafficking into international criminal enterprise that used martial arts tournaments as recruitment and elimination centers. Tournament Day 2 erupted in violence as quarterfinal matches began with deadly intent. Steven's opponent, Andrei Volkov, was a Sambo specialist from Victor's organization who had been specifically trained to counter Aikido techniques through months of preparation. The fight immediately revealed Volkov's extensive knowledge of Steven's preferred methods. When Steven attempted his signature wrist control, Volkov countered with a Sambo throw that nearly sent Steven to the canvas. The Russians' aggressive grappling combinations were designed to overwhelm Aikido's defensive principles through relentless pressure. Steven was forced to abandon pure Aikido, drawing from his broader martial arts background to survive Volkov's assault. Joint locks from his law enforcement training mixed with striking techniques from his extensive cross-training as the two masters battled across the ring. The victory came when Steven used Volkov's aggression against him, timing a perfect counter, as the Russian overcommit to a takedown attempt. But the win cost Steven. His left shoulder suffered damage that would hamper his mobility in subsequent fights. Meanwhile, Jimmy Morrison faced 3 opponents simultaneously in what Boris announced as a special exhibition match. The other legitimate fighters recognized this as an execution disguised as entertainment, but security forces prevented any intervention. Jimmy's boxing expertise served him well initially, but 3 fresh opponents eventually overwhelmed his defenses. As he suffered serious injuries from the coordinated assault, Steven abandoned all pretense of maintaining cover. He leaped into Jimmy's ring, demonstrating his full capabilities against multiple opponents simultaneously. The display was spectacular and decisive. Three men trained in different martial arts disciplines defeated in less than 30 seconds through precise application of aikido principles adapted for multiple attackers. The crowd of legitimate fighters watched in amazement as Steven effortlessly controlled three opponents, redirecting their attacks into each other while maintaining perfect balance and positioning. The demonstration revealed why he had become legendary. Technical mastery combined with tactical intelligence and unshakable composure. Victor appeared ringside surrounded by armed guards, his cold applause echoing through the suddenly silent arena. Magnificent, Mr. Seagal. Truly worthy of your reputation. Unfortunately, the tournament format must be adjusted to accommodate your unexpected abilities. Security forces surrounded the remaining legitimate fighters while Victor's operatives took control positions throughout the facility. The facade of legitimate competition finally dropped completely as armed men herded Danny Park, Carlos Mendoza, and the other authentic martial artists into a separate area. Welcome to the real competition, Victor announced with predatory satisfaction. Now we discover who among you is worthy of my organization's opportunities and who requires permanent retirement. The warehouse erupted into chaos as Steven signaled the legitimate fighters to resist capture, transforming the tournament into open warfare between Victor's criminal army and a small group of martial artists fighting for their lives. The warehouse complex exploded into battle as Steven coordinated the legitimate fighters' resistance against Victor's security forces. Years of tactical training merged with martial arts mastery as he directed what quickly became a running fight through multiple buildings. Jimmy Morrison, despite his injuries from the exhibition match, proved invaluable in close-quarters combat. His boxing expertise adapted perfectly to the chaotic environment, while his experience with troubled youth helped him recognize which of Victor's staff were actually captives forced into service. Danny Park and Carlos Mendoza used their respective specialties to control key choke points throughout the facility. Danny's taekwondo kicks proved devastating in the narrow corridors, while Carlos's ground fighting expertise neutralized opponents in confined spaces. Steven led the assault on Building C where the captives were held, fighting through waves of armed guards using a combination of stealth, tactical movement, and overwhelming martial arts superiority. His aikido training proved perfect for dealing with multiple attackers in close quarters, redirecting gunfire, using opponents' momentum against them, and maintaining mobility despite his injured shoulder. The battle became personal when Marcus Webb finally confronted Steven in Building C's main corridor. The younger man had been enhanced with chemical stimulants and trained specifically to counter Steven's techniques, making him more dangerous than any previous opponent. Their fight was brutal and destructive, moving through multiple rooms as they tested each other's skills to the breaking point. Marcus combined traditional martial arts with dirty fighting techniques and chemical enhancement, while Steven relied on experience, technical precision, and sheer determination. The corridor battle showcased both fighters at their peak abilities. Marcus's youth and preparation versus Steven's mastery and wisdom, with the outcome determining not just personal victory, but the fate of dozens of captives throughout the facility. Steven's victory came through superior conditioning and technique. But the cost was severe, multiple injuries that left him exhausted and bleeding. As he released the captives, including Helen Rodriguez, Victor's voice echoed through the building's intercom system. Very impressive, Mr. Seagal. But I'm afraid this facility is about to experience a catastrophic structural failure. Explosive charges began detonating throughout the complex in sequence, designed to bring down the buildings while eliminating all evidence of Victor's criminal operation. The rescue had succeeded, but survival now depended on evacuating dozens of people from a collapsing facility. Steven faced the ultimate hero's choice: pursue Victor, who was escaping via helicopter, or coordinate the evacuation of captives and legitimate fighters who would die without his leadership. He chose to save lives, directing the escape, while Victor disappeared into the Colorado sky with threats of future retribution. The warehouse complex shuddered and groaned as Victor's explosive charges detonated in carefully timed sequence, designed to bring down the structures while eliminating evidence and witnesses. Steven led the desperate evacuation from Building C, coordinating multiple escape routes while fighting through collapsing infrastructure. Jimmy Morrison appeared at Steven's side despite orders to evacuate with the other fighters, his loyalty overriding concerns for personal safety. Together, they guided groups of captives through smoke-filled corridors toward emergency exits as the building began its inevitable collapse. Dr. Manning had been gathering final evidence from Victor's computer systems when the explosions began. Her escape route was blocked by falling debris, but she managed to transmit crucial intelligence about Victor's international network to FBI headquarters before becoming trapped in the building's command center. Steven faced an agonizing choice: ensure his own escape with the rescued captives, or attempt to reach Dr. Manning through increasingly dangerous terrain. His decision was immediate and characteristic. He sent Jimmy ahead with the evacuees while turning back into the collapsing structure. The rescue attempt became a race against structural failure as Steven fought his way through debris-filled corridors toward the command center where Manning was trapped. His injured shoulder hampered his mobility, but determination drove him forward through impossible conditions that he reached Manning just as the building's central support system failed. Catastrophically, her leg was pinned under fallen concrete, and the surrounding structure was seconds from complete collapse. Steven's aikido training provided the leverage techniques needed to free her, but their escape required navigating through a building that was actively destroying itself. They emerged from the collapsing facility just as the final support beams gave way, carrying Manning while she maintained radio contact with approaching FBI units. The warehouse complex burned behind them as Victor's helicopter disappeared into the Colorado mountains. Helen Rodriguez proved her resilience during the evacuation, helping other captives navigate to safety despite her own ordeal. Tommy Chun and most of the original kidnapping victims were successfully rescued, but approximately half of the captives Victor had been holding were recaptured during the chaos or had been evacuated by his forces before the assault began. Victor's final taunt came via radio transmission as Steven watched the facility burn. "The mountains of Colorado are beautiful this time of year, Mr. Seagal. Perhaps you'd like to visit my more permanent facilities." Detective Kowalski arrived with law enforcement reinforcements, but her late arrival and coordination with Victor's people confirmed Steven's suspicions about her corruption. Dr. Manning's transmitted intelligence had already exposed the depths of official involvement in the trafficking network. The immediate battle was won, but Victor's escape with significant resources and remaining captives meant the war was far from over. The fighting was more intense and deadly than anything in the previous chapters. These men were professionals who killed for a living, equipped with military weapons and willing to use lethal force without hesitation. Dr. Manning's medical knowledge proved crucial as she treated injured captives while sharing intelligence about the compound's layout. Victor's personal quarters and command center were located at the facility's highest level, accessible only through a heavily defended central elevator shaft or a treacherous external climbing route. The third surprise came when Manning revealed she'd successfully planted tracking devices on Victor's escape vehicles and communication equipment during her captivity, providing real-time intelligence to FBI forces approaching the compound. However, Victor had prepared for this possibility. Explosive charges throughout the facility would eliminate all evidence if rescue seemed imminent. With 30 minutes remaining on Victor's self-destruct countdown, Steven faced the crucial decision between the heavily defended elevator shaft and the dangerous external climb to reach Victor's command center. The elevator would mean fighting through concentrated defensive positions, while the climb exposed him to attacks from multiple directions while maintaining precarious footing. Steven chose the external route, using his action hero physicality to scale the compound's exterior while Victor's forces attacked from windows and defensive positions carved into the mountain face. The vertical battlefield required him to fight while maintaining grip on rock faces, using the environment itself as both weapon and shield. Each guard eliminated and obstacle overcome brought him closer to Victor, but consumed precious time from the countdown. Steven's injured shoulder hampered his climbing ability, forcing him to rely on leg strength and his uninjured arm while defending against opponents who held positional advantages. The external climb showcased Steven's adaptability under extreme conditions. When guards fired from windows, he used rock formations as cover while continuing his ascent. When defenders dropped explosives, he timed his movements to avoid blast zones while maintaining forward progress. His tactical creativity emerged as he turned the mountain environment against Victor's forces. Controlled rock slides eliminated multiple opponents simultaneously, while weather conditions masked his movements between defensive positions. The natural setting became an active participant in the combat sequences. Meanwhile, Jimmy Morrison and Dr. Manning coordinated the evacuation of captives through tunnels Manning had discovered during her imprisonment. Their progress was hampered by Victor's remaining forces and automated security systems designed to prevent mass escapes. The countdown added urgency to every movement as Steven realized Victor intended to eliminate all evidence regardless of the cost in human lives. The self-destruct wasn't just about destroying physical evidence. It would kill everyone in the facility, captives and rescuers alike. Steven's determination reached its peak as he faced seemingly impossible odds with innocent lives depending on his success. His internal monologue revealed the warrior philosophy that had driven his entire career, the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect others, even when victory seemed impossible. The climb became a test of character as much as physical ability. Each handhold represented another step toward either triumph or death, with no middle ground possible in Victor's mountain fortress. Steven reached the command center level as the countdown showed 15 minutes remaining, but found it heavily fortified with automated defenses and Victor's elite personal guard. 6 of the world's most dangerous martial artists waited between him and his final confrontation with the criminal mastermind. The gauntlet that awaited would test every skill Steven had developed over decades of training. Steven breached Victor's command center level to face 6 elite martial artists. Victor's personal guard recruited from international criminal organizations and trained specifically to counter his aikido techniques. Each represented a different fighting discipline, and all had been briefed extensively on neutralizing Steven's strengths. The Muay Thai champion attacked first, using aggressive knee strikes and elbow combinations designed to overwhelm Steven's defensive positioning. Steven countered by using aikido's circular movements to neutralize the linear attacks, redirecting the fighter's momentum while staying outside the range of devastating strikes. The Russian Systema expert proved more challenging, using unpredictable movement patterns and psychological warfare alongside technical skill. Steven relied on traditional aikido principles, maintaining center, controlling distance, and using the opponent's aggression against him. To overcome the unconventional fighting style, the Chinese Kung Fu master combined traditional techniques with modern combat applications, forcing Steven to draw from his extensive cross-training to match the varied attack patterns. The fight became a chess match of technique versus counter-technique as both fighters adapted their strategies mid-combat. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt attempted to force ground fighting where his specialized skills would dominate, but Steven's years of cross-training allowed him to defend takedowns while maintaining his preferred standing position. When the fight did go to the ground, Steven used aikido principles adapted for grappling to control position and create opportunities for escape. The Krav Maga specialist represented pure aggression and street fighting brutality, using any available weapon and targeting vulnerable areas without regard for sporting conventions. Steven's law enforcement background provided the defensive skills needed to survive this assault while maintaining his own moral standards about appropriate force. The traditional Japanese karateka proved the most challenging opponent. His fundamental understanding of martial arts philosophy matched Steven's own, creating a battle between different interpretations of the warrior path. Victory came through superior experience and the wisdom that comes from decades of dedicated practice. Each fight cost Steven energy and accumulated damage, while the countdown continued its relentless progress toward zero. Victor's psychological warfare continued through the facility's intercom system, describing in detail what would happen to the captives if Steven failed to reach him in time. Strategic thinking became as important as martial arts skill. Steven realized he couldn't defeat all 6 opponents through pure combat. He had to use environmental advantages, distraction techniques, and tactical intelligence to overcome superior numbers. Some opponents were defeated through traditional martial arts, others through environmental hazards or psychological manipulation. The variety of solutions required demonstrated Steven's complete mastery of combat in all its forms. Physical, mental, and spiritual. Steven defeated the final guard. The countdown reached 8 minutes. Victor's command center lay behind reinforced doors that would require explosive charges to breach, consuming precious time while innocent lives hung in the balance. Steven used his last explosive device to breach Victor's reinforced command center, entering to find the space transformed into a traditional martial arts arena. Victor emerged from concealment wearing ceremonial fighting attire, his presence commanding the room as monitors displayed both the self-destruct countdown and the captive's evacuation progress. "Welcome to my inner sanctum, Mr. Seagal," Victor said with cold formality. "I've been anticipating this moment since our first conversation. Finally, we can settle this as warriors should, through honorable single combat." The fight that followed represented the culmination of everything both men had learned about martial arts and violence. Victor proved to be Steven's most challenging opponent, a master combatant in his own right who combined techniques from multiple disciplines with the ruthless pragmatism of a career criminal. Their battle was as much philosophical as physical. Victor represented everything corrupted about martial arts commercialization and criminal exploitation, using traditional techniques for evil purposes. Steven embodied the protective values that made martial arts a force for justice rather than oppression. Victor had studied Steven's methods extensively, preparing specific counters for his signature techniques. When Steven attempted his preferred wrist controls, Victor used systema responses to reverse the positions. When Steven relied on aikido's circular movements, Victor employed linear attacks that disrupted the flow. The command center became an active part of their confrontation as both fighters used computers, furniture, and security equipment as weapons. Monitors shattered under the impact of thrown bodies, while the facility's own defensive systems became tools for attack and defense. Steven's victory came through the integration of all his skills: martial arts mastery, tactical intelligence, and moral clarity that gave him strength when purely physical abilities weren't sufficient. Victor's defeat represented the triumph of traditional values over criminal corruption. The psychological conflict proved as important as the physical battle. Victor attempted to break Steven's resolve by describing his victim's suffering and his plans for the current captives. Steven's responses revealed his moral core. He fought not for glory or revenge, but to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Victor's downfall came from overconfidence in his preparation and underestimation of Steven's adaptability. Years of criminal success had made him believe his power was absolute. But true martial arts mastery transcends any single fighting system or tactical approach. With Victor defeated but still alive, Steven faced the final moral choice: ensure the criminal face justice through proper legal channels, or take permanent action that would guarantee he could never hurt anyone again. Steven's decision to spare Victor's life while ensuring his capture demonstrated the ethical foundation that separated true martial artists from mere fighters. Justice required that Victor face legal consequences rather than summary execution. The countdown showed 90 seconds remaining as Steven worked frantically to disable the self-destruct system using damaged control panels while the defeated Victor watched with bitter satisfaction. With 90 seconds on the countdown, Steven stood over the defeated Victor while frantically working to disable the self-destruct system using control panels damaged during their fight. Victor, barely conscious but still defiant, taunted Steven about the impossibility of saving everyone within the remaining time. Steven's law enforcement background provided the technical knowledge needed to bypass damaged circuits and override automated systems, but Victor's sabotage had created multiple redundant triggers that required careful disarmament. Each wire cut and circuit bypassed brought him closer to success while precious seconds ticked away. "Tell me the override codes," Steven demanded, maintaining pressure on Victor's injured shoulder. "You can stop this." Victor's response revealed his twisted psychology. "Even if you save them today, there are others like me. This is just one facility in a network spanning continents. You cannot stop what we've built." Jimmy Morrison's voice crackled over a damaged radio, reporting that most captives had been evacuated, but some remained trapped in lower levels by collapsed tunnels. The partial evacuation meant Steven's choice wasn't between his own escape and everyone else's survival. Some people would die regardless unless he could stop the countdown. Steven's solution combined martial arts philosophy with practical engineering. Instead of fighting the self-destruct system directly, he used Victor's own security protocols against the explosive mechanism. By triggering emergency evacuation procedures throughout the facility, he created a cascade failure that disabled the charges while opening all security doors. The technical resolution showcased Steven's complete skill set, not just martial arts and tactical ability, but the investigative and technical knowledge that made him effective in law enforcement. True heroism required more than physical courage. It demanded the intelligence to find solutions when direct action wasn't sufficient. The mountain facility didn't explode, but it began a controlled collapse as damaged support systems failed throughout the complex. Steven faced one final physical challenge, escaping through increasingly dangerous terrain while carrying the unconscious Victor and ensuring the final captives reached safety. His path to freedom required navigating collapsing corridors, climbing over debris, and coordinating with Jimmy Morrison and Dr. Manning, who were leading the last group of rescued prisoners toward evacuation points. The facility's destruction created new obstacles while time pressure demanded constant forward movement. Steven's success came through the integration of everything he represented: martial arts skill, tactical intelligence, moral clarity, and the simple determination to protect innocent people regardless of personal cost. He saved the captives, captured Victor alive for justice, and emerged from the mountain as both action hero and authentic martial artist. The collapse behind him represented not just the destruction of Victor's criminal empire, but the triumph of traditional values over modern corruption. Steven had proven that true strength came from character rather than mere physical ability. Victor, in federal custody but unrepentant, made one final threat as medical teams treated his injuries. "This isn't over, Seagal. There are others like me, and they'll come for you." Steven's response embodied his character. "Let them come. I'll be ready." If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel. 2 hours after the warehouse complex's destruction, Steven sat in the parking lot of Denver General Hospital while emergency medical teams treated Jimmy Morrison's injuries from the exhibition match and building collapse. FBI agents swarmed the scene, but their delayed response suggested either bureaucratic incompetence or deliberate obstruction. Agent Sarah Chin arrived with federal reinforcements, revealing that Dr. Patricia Manning was alive but critically injured. Medical equipment had protected her when building A collapsed. Her transmitted intelligence provided a complete organizational chart of Victor's criminal network, including his primary operations base hidden in a fortified compound deep in the Colorado Rockies. The mountain facility is his headquarters, Agent Chun explained, spreading satellite photographs across a makeshift command post. Intelligence suggests he's holding approximately 200 captives from around the world, representing years of trafficking operations across multiple countries. Steven studied the aerial reconnaissance images, noting the compound's strategic position and defensive capabilities. The facility was carved into a mountainside, combining natural protection with modern security systems that would make conventional assault extremely costly in human lives. Helen Rodriguez insisted on remaining involved despite her ordeal, revealing that Victor's organization had killed her nephew 5 years earlier in similar trafficking operations. Her personal stake in seeing justice done made her a valuable source of motivation for Steven's continued involvement. Jimmy Morrison refused to abandon the mission despite his injuries, arguing that his boxing gym's community service work had shown him the devastating impact of human trafficking on families and neighborhoods. His commitment to protecting vulnerable youth made retreat impossible. Tommy Chin's family arrived at the hospital desperate for news about their missing son, but he remained among the captives Victor had successfully evacuated during the warehouse battle. The knowledge that rescue had come so close made their anguish even more acute. Agent Chin outlined the tactical challenges of assaulting Victor's mountain compound: heavily fortified positions, difficult terrain, international mercenary security force, and Victor's established protocols for eliminating witnesses if threatened by law enforcement action. Detective Kowalski attempted to insert herself into the federal investigation, but Agent Shin revealed that Manning's intelligence included evidence of her corruption. As federal agents moved to arrest her, Kowalski made a desperate phone call, presumably warning Victor of the impending federal response. Steven realized that conventional law enforcement assault would result in the deaths of all remaining captives. Victor's mountain fortress was designed specifically to resist official intervention while maintaining the option to eliminate evidence and witnesses if threatened. The logic was unassailable. Only a solo infiltration could avoid triggering Victor's protocols for witness elimination while gathering the intelligence needed for successful rescue operations. Steven prepared to leave Denver for the mountains. Victor's final call confirmed the stakes. "Come alone to my mountain home, Mr. Seagal. Let's finish this properly, warrior to warrior. You have until sunrise, or I begin killing hostages one by one." Pre-dawn darkness enveloped the Colorado Rockies. As Steven approached Victor's mountain fortress through dense pine forests, his breath forming clouds in the thin, cold air. The compound carved into the mountainside represented the culmination of years of criminal enterprise, a fortress designed to house Victor's international trafficking operation while remaining invisible to conventional surveillance. Steven's reconnaissance revealed the facility's impressive scope. Multiple levels were built directly into the rock face, connected by reinforced tunnels and protected by both natural terrain and sophisticated security systems. External defenses included roving patrols with military-grade equipment, motion sensors networked throughout the forest approaches, and trained attack dogs that could detect intruders from considerable distances. The main facility housed Victor's command operations and living quarters, while a separate structure served as prisoner housing for the estimated 200 captives from around the world. Guard towers provided overlapping fields of fire across all approach routes, making conventional assault virtually impossible without massive casualties. Steven used meditation techniques to center himself for the coming battle, knowing his injured shoulder would limit his effectiveness in prolonged combat. His breathing exercises helped manage both the physical pain and the psychological pressure of operating alone against overwhelming odds. The infiltration began with systematic neutralization of perimeter security. Steven's combination of law enforcement training and martial arts expertise created efficient, silent takedowns of guards and electronic systems. Each small victory brought him deeper into Victor's trap while eliminating the criminals early. Warning capabilities. Moving through the outer defenses revealed the compound's true purpose. This wasn't just a trafficking center. It was headquarters for international organized crime with connections spanning multiple continents. Weapons caches, communication equipment, and financial records suggested operations far beyond human trafficking into arms dealing, money laundering, and contract violence. Steven discovered that the prisoner housing structure contained dozens of underground cells carved directly from mountain rock, creating a natural dungeon that would be impossible to escape without outside assistance. The captives included not just recent trafficking victims, but people who had been held for months or years. As he prepared to begin the rescue operation, alarms began sounding throughout the compound. Victor's voice echoed from hidden speakers, positioned throughout the facility. "Welcome to my home, Mr. Seagal. I trust you'll find the accommodations challenging." The trap was sprung, but Steven was committed to seeing it through to whatever end awaited. Alarm sirens wailed across the mountain compound as Steven found himself trapped in the prisoner housing structure with dozens of terrified captives, but no apparent escape route. Victor's security forces began systematic sweeps of the facility, forcing Steven to fight his way deeper into the mountain complex while protecting the people he'd come to rescue. The first surprise came when Steven discovered Dr. Patricia Manning, alive in the compound's medical facility, where she'd been forced to treat injured fighters and perform procedures on captives. Her survival provided both hope and additional responsibility. Steven now had to rescue Manning along with all other prisoners. "He's been forcing me to implant tracking devices and perform psychological conditioning procedures," Manning whispered urgently as Steven freed her from restraints. "The medical equipment here is designed for major surgery, not just sports medicine. He's been harvesting organs from captives who resist conditioning." The revelation added new horror to Victor's criminal enterprise. This wasn't just human trafficking. It was systematic exploitation of human beings for every possible criminal purpose, including medical experimentation and organ harvesting for international black markets. The second surprise came when Jimmy Morrison appeared despite Steven's explicit instructions to stay behind. The boxer had followed Steven to the compound, his sense of loyalty overriding concerns for personal safety. "Couldn't let you do this alone," Jimmy said simply, his injuries from the warehouse battle clearly hampering his mobility. "Besides, my gym teaches kids that we stand up for each other when it matters." Together, they began coordinating the evacuation of captives while fighting through waves of Victor's international mercenary force. These weren't street criminals or tournament fighters. They were professional soldiers and martial artists recruited from conflict zones around the world. Steven faced opponents trained in combat systems he'd never encountered, former Spetsnaz operatives using Russian military techniques, ex-French Foreign Legion fighters with expertise in desert warfare adapted to mountain combat, and specialists from various international criminal organizations.